Story 1. It may sound silly, but we got along well. One day, while we were cooking together, I started recording a video as she added cheese to the food. I approached her like a reporter, holding a ladle as if it were a microphone, and said, "Here we have Naim, who has been passionate about cooking at home ever since her restaurant didn't work out. Let me ask you, when did you decide to add cheese to this dish?" Without skipping a beat, she replied, "When I was 14 years old, I thought to myself," and proceeded to discuss why cheese might be a good choice for this meal. Her response to my playful humor and her willingness to engage with it was when I realized. Story 2. It is usually not one big moment. It is the little things stacking up. Feeling safe, seen, and like you are fully yourself around them. That quiet kind of love that feels like home. Story 3. I just knew from our first date that I would try to marry this girl. For over 30 years, we haven't spent more than a week apart. Story 4. Honestly, it wasn't about a big moment of realizing he's the one. It just happened naturally. We never had to overthink our relationship or question where it was headed. Things flowed at their own pace, and we knew we were meant to be. Now, 8 years later, I look back and think, wow, he really is the one because everything feels so easy when I'm with him. Story 5. I already knew. We moved quickly for the first part. We moved in together after knowing each other for 3 months at 19 years old. We lived together for about 6 months, and everything was going great. Then our roof started leaking in the bedroom. We were both so frustrated, not with each other, and nervous since this was our first apartment. We moved the bed and put a pot out to catch the water. He spent as much time as needed covering my ears until I fell asleep. It was in that specific moment that I truly knew. I felt it in my soul. We've been together for 17 years now. We work together and have a really sweet love, and I am so grateful. We have been by each other's sides through the worst and the best. I love that man. Story 6. When I realized that I felt completely safe around them, I wasn't constantly worried about hiding my flaws or afraid they might push me away. I wasn't afraid to talk about my insecurities or explain some of the issues I was dealing with. When I am around them, I can just be myself. Story 7. We both had a feeling early on, but seeing how fiercely loyal she is to her loved ones and how much they trust and look to her for opinions made a strong impression on me. She went out of her way to do little things that made me feel loved, and without thinking about it, I found myself wanting to do the same for her. Very early in the relationship, she had her best friend come over, and they built a fort in her living room, complete with string lights and a mattress for us to relax in that evening. How can you not marry the lady who builds a fort for your second date? Story 8. I realized he was the only person I could spend 8 hours with and not be completely tired of by the end. Our children are now on that same very short list most days. Story 9. I started breaking out in hives, and after narrowing it down, I realized it was the soap he was using. He went that night and got new soap. It was a small thing, but it made me realize he was serious about this. We have been married for almost 20 years now. Story 10. There wasn't one specific thing. It was just many positive signs along the way, both large and small. About 2 weeks in, I sensed something about him was different from others I had dated. Took me 7 years to marry him, but I felt very early on that I might have found something special. Story 11. He wasn't needy or an energy vampire, like I normally find myself surrounded by. We got along really well, and I genuinely enjoyed his company. Every time I was with him, it felt like my constant fight or flight anxiety stopped, and I felt safe. He felt like home, you know? We've only been married a few months, but we've been together for a decade, live together, and we barely argue. We laugh a lot. At each other, together, and at our dog. It's just fun and relaxing at the same time. It's perfect. Story 12. The first time they missed a day of school, I had to pretend to be sick so I could go home early to call and make sure they were all right since we were only 13. Then again, when we were 23, she took a trip to Las Vegas, and I spent the whole weekend with my phone in hand, trying not to text her because I missed her so much. Story 13. I had a plan to end my life after years of abuse and anger, and then finding out my mother was terminally ill. I decided to get a job at Home Depot to save up some money and go to Phoenix, Arizona, where I would end it. I was just about ready to leave when I noticed a girl walk in. She was the new bookkeeper. Something awakened inside me, and I decided to stay a bit longer. Eventually, we talked, dated, and fell in love. She literally saved my life, gave me purpose, and provided me with a reason to live. My wife is my everything. Story 14, we had the worst timing. I was in the most challenging situation of my life, and he chose to stay. When I asked him about it, he recalled a time when he came home from work covered in paint, and I helped him wash every bit of it off in the tub. Story 15, we met as young adults and spent the first couple of years together every day. I eventually lost my job and had no money for about 5 months. During that time, she paid for everything without question and never complained about my inability to contribute. I knew as soon as I got back on my feet that I would propose because she did not have to do that for me. We married the following year and have now been married for 19 years. Story 16. He came to my apartment after a day of fishing on his boat with his friend and the friend's 11-year-old daughter. While fishing, he noticed that the daughter was sitting quietly and feeling seasick. They hadn't realized she was unwell, and he felt awful for ignoring her. As he told me this, his eyes became a little misty because the little girl wasn't feeling well. He's still such a sweet person. Story 17, we saw the world in the same way, noting oddities with similar thoughts. The alignment felt supernatural or mystical. By our second date, I was certain. We have been married for 4 years. Story 18, I am a stay-at-home mom. During the pandemic, my husband was laid off. We were not struggling financially, but we knew we had to tighten our belts until he could regain employment. During this time, I developed a hernia in my spine and experienced severe pain. I was bedridden for 6 months and relied on painkillers. Our daughter was 6 years old at the time and needed a lot of supervision. My husband stepped up in every way. He took care of the house, cooked, cleaned, helped with schoolwork, managed our child, took me to all my physiotherapy appointments, and even considered taking out a personal loan in case I needed surgery on my spine, as insurance would only cover a limited amount. This man managed everything while hustling every single day to bring in an income until he found a job. My husband is worth his weight in gold. I am grateful every day that I won the lottery in having him as my life partner. Story 19. I became pregnant after dating for only a couple of months. I gave birth at 24 weeks, and my son was placed in a neonatal intensive care unit hours away from our home. My fiancé drove 4 hours round trip 5 days a week to continue working and never let me spend a night alone. Our son eventually faced life-altering complications, and we had to make the decision to remove his breathing tube and allow him to pass. My fiancé supported me in ways I have never experienced, and I cannot imagine doing life without him now. Story 20. I can tell you the date. It was October 30th, 2012. I was a 21-year-old bartender. She was a 19-year-old server. It was a typical restaurant scenario, working late, drinks, and a hookup that continued throughout the summer. Nothing serious. I got stuck working on my day off, which meant I was going to miss the release of Assassin's Creed 3. She worked lunch and went home. She showed up at closing time around midnight with my game, a bag of Oreos, and a large bag of marijuana for me. I noticed that this was the first time in as long as I could remember that someone did something nice for me purely out of kindness. I realized she genuinely cared about me, and I stopped viewing it as just a hookup. I began to think about how she really made me feel. Safe, loved, and cared for. Something I didn't know I was missing. She encouraged me to be a better person, told me that any drugs other than marijuana were a deal breaker, so I quit everything, even though I was a bit of a degenerate. Long story short, we've been together ever since. 3 kids with a 4th on the way. I have a high-profile sales job, and she's a hospital director working on her Master of Business Administration while we raise our 3, almost 4, kids. She's my rock, my best friend, and the one person in the world I can count on. We've come a long way, and I am so happy she chose me. I thank God, or whoever, every day that I found her. Story 21. This was a couple of months into dating. While texting, I mentioned I had a sore throat and was dreading going to university for evening class after work. He went home from work in the middle of the day to make me a flask of warm honey ginger water, then picked me up from my work, gave me the flask, and took the train with me halfway to university. My first thought was that nobody does that for you if they don't love you. 7 years together, 3 years married. Story 22. I am no longer married to her, but I realized I wanted to marry my ex-wife when I recognized how much she improved my life simply by being there. She inspired me to be a better person, and I sought her acknowledgement and approval in my efforts to grow. I felt she was my soulmate, and I wanted to commit to her before she recognized how much better she truly is than me. Story 23. As cliché and obnoxious as it may sound, you just have that gut feeling and intuitive sense of peace and stillness. I did not have that with my first spouse. Story 24. The first time I talked to him, he felt like home. We have been married for 8 years, together for 11, and have 3 kids. We look forward to the rest of our lives together. Story 25. We met on a social media platform and started talking and video chatting. After a couple of days, I knew there was something different. I had always dismissed the idea of soulmates, as it seemed a bit like Hollywood movie and greeting card nonsense, but it turns out it's a real concept. It feels like we're connected on a level beyond normal, as if we somehow knew each other in a previous life. He just makes sense to me. I naively thought that a soulmate meant happily ever after. It's been challenging, but I guess my soul wasn't destined for an easy journey. Even when I'm beyond frustrated with him and want to escape, he still makes perfect sense to me. I never have to question, why on earth did he do that? Even on the occasions when I dislike his actions. In a world where most people confuse me completely, he makes sense. Story 26. For me, at least, I know it sounds cliché, but when she walked into the room that first day we met, an incredible feeling washed over me. A sensation that no one had ever made me react or feel the same way. Others say, it was like a bolt of lightning struck me, or it was love at first sight. I understand, and yes, it is true that it does happen. Later, she told me that the same thing happened to her too, and she felt compelled to get closer, even if just to brush past me, to make physical contact and reinforce the feeling a bit more. It was like our souls connected. If you haven't experienced it, it hasn't happened to you, but I promise you it is very real. Story 27. I have experienced many ups and downs in my life. My previous relationships often celebrated my successes but abandoned me or cheated when I was struggling. My current fiancée supported me during my lowest points. I had no social life, was unemployed, and felt hopeless. She encouraged me to prioritize my mental health and assisted me in my career. She stood by me when I felt worthless and was there for me every step of the way until I discovered my path. She recognized my potential when others did not, and honestly, I didn't either. I found a partner with whom I want to share my life, and I will be there for her through everything. Story 28. My best friend observed that I was the same person around my future spouse as I was when not with him. Story 29. We knew from our first date. It lasted 12 hours and ended in a hotel room discussing how many kids we would have. He was leaving to go traveling, and even though we both knew it was soon, he asked me on our second date to go with him. He said he understood if I said no, and in that case, he would fly back for 1 week a month to see me. We would make it work. That level of compromise and the idea that if he wanted to, he would made me say yes to going. Our third date was a 2-week trial in Italy, where I got bitten by a sandfly, and it was worse than it sounds. He walked into the room, saw me sobbing in the shower, picked me up, bundled me into a towel, and held me until I fell asleep. When we came back, I told him I loved him, and he moved in with me the next day, all less than a month into our relationship. We went traveling for 3 months after dating for just under 6 weeks. We got engaged after just over a year and married last November. We've been together for 5 years now and will be trying for kids next year. I don't believe in soulmates, but I believe in fate and destiny, and I truly believe he is mine. Story 30. She tolerated my idiosyncrasies, and I tolerated hers. However, during certain times of the month, apparently, I breathe too loudly and should stop breathing altogether, or so I have been told. Story 31. I could mention aspects of his personality, values, and shared interests. These are the qualities that made me tell friends he was marriage material after the first date. However, there is really one main thing I've noticed that is different in our relationship compared to previous long-term relationships. I've never doubted our connection or whether I want to be with him. Not even during fights, at least not seriously or for more than a brief moment. I never question whether his behavior is acceptable or if it's supposed to be this way. The answer to those questions often comes down to compatibility rather than whether something is objectively right or wrong. I just know that he is amazing and that I want to be with him, even when we have disagreements or when he does things that annoy me, or I do things that he finds annoying. It's all stuff we can handle. Story 32. There was no specific moment of realization. I just knew that not only were they my best friend, but I also wanted to spend the rest of my life with them. Any future I imagined included them. Story 33. The morning after our first night together, I heard that he has a very musical bottom. It made me giggle, and it still does every time. Then it reached a point where I didn't like being at home without him, so we began living together within a month. Story 34. Every moment I have spent with her since we first started dating has been extraordinary. It is an indescribable feeling of unconditional love. Although I have been in love a few times before, she makes me feel as if I have never loved anyone else in my life. Comparing my feelings for her to those I had for my past partners, it completely dwarfs any past emotions, no matter how strong they were. Story 35. My now wife and I were in the same friend group in college. Our group was pretty tight. When we graduated and went our separate ways, I missed her the most. I'm about to age myself here, but she and I would talk on AOL Instant Messenger every night. The others, maybe briefly twice a week. Story 36. It was a combination of factors, but surprisingly the biggest cue for me to proceed was when I realized we were always happy doing nothing. I dated many women before her, and they always seemed to need entertainment to enjoy spending time together. They weren't good at simply being together without activities. None of them ever canceled plans just to be alone together. She would do this all the time. Another factor was her encouraging me not to let our relationship affect my friendships. She would often remind me that I hadn't spent time with my friends lately, and she wouldn't make plans with her friends. She would just say, "I'll be here when you get home." It wasn't a matter of her saying I should do this so she could do that, which was unusual for me at first. Then I realized she genuinely cared about maintaining friendships and wasn't willing to sacrifice them for her own happiness. So I guess it all comes down to being happy no matter the situation and ensuring that those around you are as happy as you are. Story 37. I realized I wanted to be with my wife early on when we were talking about movies. I told her that my favorite X-Men movie was First Class, and she said, "Yeah, that one's cool, but you can't beat the first one." I just had a feeling that we would be able to talk a lot, and we do. To this day, that's our favorite thing to do. Just talk about everything. Story 38. There were so many things. When we were dating, a few weeks into talking and seeing each other, he did not mention sex at all. It was different from most other guys. Regarding marriage, he had integrity about everything. He always wanted to do the right thing. Our morals aligned so well that I knew we would be together. Story 39. When he was showing me his favorite movie, he asked me a question to see if I understood something important about it. I answered with a lengthy response, which made him realize I was truly engaged. He then said, "That's my girl." I still get butterflies thinking about that moment. Story 40. Realized soon but waited for the 6-month mark to be sure. I graded her on these qualities: happy, smart, and self-sufficient, and willing to have a child. She received 4 out of 4. We are still together after 25 years. Story 41. I could imagine my life without him. He was the most beautiful man I had ever met, inside and out. His eyes would melt me, and it is the same now, 13 years later. Story 42. On a first date, I thought to myself that I would marry him. I have no idea why. We were very young back then, but I knew and was right. It was just a moment of knowing. Story 43. When we couldn't spend more than a day apart since our first date, It didn't feel desperate or anxious. It just felt like family. We had a rough patch last year, but we are doing better now. Story 44. Before I knew where I would be stationed, I asked if she wanted to move with me. 5 weeks later, I received orders, and she moved from Florida to Maine because of me. That took a lot of courage, so I had to find my own. Story 45. I loved being around him all the time. Even the quiet moments were enjoyable. He made me feel like it was the same for him. At the same time, he gives me the freedom to travel on my own or with friends and to pursue my own interests and vice versa. One major thing is that even when we were not on the same page, we always talked things through without any profanity. We discussed everything as calmly as if we were talking about the weather. That calmness spoke to me. I want to be with you forever. Story 46. Anyone can enjoy you at your best, but she was able to handle and understand me at my worst. That always helps as well. Story 47. He stayed by my side after my niece was stillborn. I offered him the option to leave, but he is still here 17 years later. Story 48. Most girls I dated offered to do something nice for my birthday, like cooking for me. I would request blueberry pancakes, but they always insisted it was too simple and not a proper dinner. Most made me steak, but one made fish. I met my wife a bit before my birthday, and she asked if she could cook something for me and what I wanted. I said pancakes, and she made me pancakes. We hadn't been together very long, about 5 weeks, when I bought a ring and proposed 3 months later during a helicopter fishing trip in New Zealand. We have been married for 3 years and together since 2018, with the wedding delayed due to the pandemic. Story 49. Early in the relationship, I was unsure if we were still in our honeymoon phase or if I was truly in love with him. It was the first time I felt my heart begin to break at the thought of being without him, and I had not experienced that with any of my other partners. I found myself wanting to be with him rather than feeling obligated to, and that made a significant difference. Story 50. We camped, just the two of us, for a long weekend. We had so much fun exploring the town and hanging out without needing anyone else. I knew then I wanted to marry him. We eventually moved to a town not far from our original adventure and took our oldest to the same campground as a toddler. Story 51. I knew from our first date. The giggly, fun, sparkly feeling you get on a date was amplified a million times. On our second date, we saw a shooting star, and I wished that he would be my person. We got married 2 years later, and he told me on our honeymoon that he had wished the same thing on the same star. Story 52. She wanted me when I had nothing but the clothes on my back. I was homeless at the time, and she was just dropped into my lap. I could offer nothing other than a good time and laughter. We were both young and in difficult situations in our lives, and we just wanted each other's company. Fast forward a decade. We own our home and have a beautiful child, with nothing but love and understanding within these walls. This woman has been my constant. She is the best thing that has ever happened to me, and I am forever grateful to have her in my life. She is truly my best friend. Story 53. My best friend told me he was ready for a relationship. I had no confidence in my own judgment after dating several truly awful men. Then this nice guy came along. Lucky me. Story 54. He had almost none of the things I thought I wanted in a man, like a career, money, a house, or a car, but he won over my dog, my mom, my nieces, and my grandma. He takes care of me and our dogs when I am sick and cooks dinner for me when I have a long day at work. We have a similar sense of humor, and when we hang out, we laugh so hard we cry. He made it official early on, so there were hardly any questions about whether he liked me. We were both at a point in life where we were ready to settle down. It got to a point where he already felt like he belonged in my family. Story 55. We were teenagers working at a department store. I was an Empire Records type of kid, and she was a shy lead cashier. It was 1984, and we had to wait at the door before our shift began. I was just being myself, greeting everyone I saw until I quoted a line from Arthur and said, "Lisa, so good to see you." She replied, "Good to see you too." That was over 40 years ago, and I can still feel like Cupid dipped into the crowd, found an arrow, and blasted me in the heart. That 1 second set it all in motion. Story 56. Aside from the obvious chemistry, it was the hugs that really sealed it for me. No one else in my life fits like she does. This is what home feels like. Story 57. One of the first times she came over, she had to use the bathroom. When she came out, she jokingly criticized my choice of toilet paper. Story 58. When we were dating early on and cuddling, I actually fell asleep in his arms, which I had never done before. I had always felt like I was someone who could cuddle and then had to turn away to go to sleep. But once I fell asleep while cuddling, I thought, oh my God, he's the one. Story 59. I have thousands of moments with my love, but recently we were at a house party. He sat on the floor opposite me, even when there were chairs available. When another guest offered to move so he could sit on the other side of the sofa I was on, he declined and said, "The best view is here," pointing at me. Even after 12 years, he can still make me blush. Story 60. I am not married yet, but I would like to marry the man I am dating right now. Every time he cooks for me, he brings the food and stands there just to watch my reaction. When I say how nice it is and how much I love it, my face lights up, and his face lights up completely. He just stands there so happy with his puppy eyes. I love this man. He tells me how much he enjoys cooking for me and that he will do whatever I want him to do. Yesterday, while driving me to work, he said, "You are the one." And I was so happy but tried not to react at that moment. Then he repeated it to me 3 times. I turned to him and asked, "Really?" He said yes, and I smiled really big and told him he is the one for me too. We have been dating for 1 year. Goodness, I love him so much. He makes me so happy. Story 61. We are fully ourselves around each other and feel seen and embraced. We laugh a lot, support each other, and resolve arguments easily. While we each do fine alone, life is better when we are together. Story 62. She made it clear that she wanted me to propose or we were going to break up. I wasn't ready for marriage, but I also didn't have a real reason to end the relationship. What I didn't understand at the time was that I did have a reason to break up. I wasn't ready to get married, and that's okay. I wasn't too concerned about how our relationship appeared to others or gaining the approval of our parents and friends. I didn't give enough attention to how it actually felt. It was fine, but she wasn't the person I was supposed to marry, and I realized that too late. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.